Okay, here's our lesson on multiplying, dividing exponents. And we're going to learn all the rules that we'll need to know when we're working with exponents and when we multiply and when we divide. So the first thing we've got to understand is, what do exponents really mean? So why do we even use exponents? So if I wrote something like 2 to the power of 3, why would I do that, and what does the 3 actually mean? Well, instead of writing something like 2 times 2 times 2, we can see that there are 3 2's multiplying together. We can do a shortcut way of writing this, and a faster way would be writing it as 2 to the power of 3. And so what this means is there are 3 2's multiplying together. And the understanding here is that 2 to the power of 3 is not equal to 6, because 2 to the power of 3 really means 2 times 2 times 2. And if I had something like 2 to the power of 4, I would have 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So this is just a shortcut way of writing repeated multiplication. And the understanding is that exponents do not multiply with the big number. What they're there is just creating a shortcut that will make it easier for you and faster for you to work with numbers that are repeated. Okay, so that's why we use exponents. The next thing would be how do I work with them, and how do the exponents kind of work? Well, the next little part that we kind of have to understand is, if I wrote something like 2 to the power of 4, or if I wrote something like negative 2 to the power of 4, or bracket negative 2 to the 4. They almost all look the same, but they are a little bit different. And this is where we have to understand two things. The first thing we have to understand is the exponent, and the second thing we have to understand is something called the base. Now, what the base is that's what the exponent is affecting. So it's affecting whatever it's attached to. And there are certain things that you have to know and just be aware of, otherwise you'll make some mistakes. In the first one, it's pretty easy. The 4 is the exponent, and it's attached to the 2. So it's telling you I have 4 2's multiplying together. Pretty easy. Let's go over to the last one here, and we'll skip the middle one. And if we take a look at this one, we see that there's a bracket, a negative, a 2, and then the bracket closes, and then there's an exponent 4. So the reason why they put brackets is they're saying everything in the brackets is being affected by the exponent. Or there are 4 of whatever's inside of the brackets. So the base here would be negative 2, not just the 2. On this middle one, the 4 is attached to the 2, but it's not attached to the negative because they didn't put brackets around it. So what this matters is when I write these out in terms of what they really mean in English. So in real English, what does this mean in terms of multiplying? On the first one, it says I have 4 2's, so it would just be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. On this one, it's saying I have 4 2's, but it doesn't include the negative. So the negative is just there. So I write it in front, and I write the 4 2's. But on the last one, the negative is included because they put it in the brackets, and it's saying I have 4 of everything, including the negative. So this one would be negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, and one more. So that's the difference. You have to be really careful and ask yourself, what is the base? And the way to remember this is, if they put brackets, they're telling you include everything. So that's the first part. The next part is the rules of multiplication. I'm just going to switch sheets here. And the rules of multiplication. Okay, the first thing to understand is, if I had something like m times m, I can rewrite that as m squared. And if I wanted to multiply an m squared times an m to the power of 3, I'm really multiplying 2 m's by 1, 2, 3 m's. And if you counted all the m's here, how many would you have? And if you think about it, it's just easy. There's 5. So you could do a shortcut here, and the shortcut is when you multiply 2 powers where the base is the same. So the base here is m, and it's fine. We can use letters, we could use numbers, it doesn't matter. As long as the bases are the same, you can add the exponents. So if that's a 2 and that's a 3, you're really going to go m2 plus 3 equals m5. And it makes sense because if we actually wrote it out with multiplication, you would see it's really 5. So that's the rule that you'll learn for multiplication is when you multiply powers, you add the exponents. Okay, so that's rule 1. Okay, let's move on to the second rule. The second rule is the opposite, and we're talking about division. So if I had something like m to the power of 3 and I'm dividing it by m to the power of 2, you can also rewrite that as a fraction because this also means divide as well. So these mean the same thing. If you think about it, if I wrote m to the 3 as m times m times m, and I divided it by m squared, or m times m, remember, when we have fractions, we can cancel things. So that m can cancel with that m cancels with that m. How many m's are left? 1. So in this rule, remember, multiplication and division are opposites of one another, and when we multiply, we added the exponents together. So rule 2 is when you divide powers, you subtract the exponents. Okay, so really you're just going to go m3 minus 2 equals m1. And you're done. Now, should you write a 1? Yes, write a 1 just to remind yourself it's there, because there's many times where the exponent is not included, and it's just a good rule of thumb to have. Okay, one little thing just to be aware of, and just so you're really careful, you want to make sure that when you do this, and we're dividing, and I had something like m to the 4 divided by m to the negative 2, that you always write your work out. Since we're dividing, we're going to use rule 2, and if we remember, rule 2 is we subtract the exponents. Write your work out so that you would see m to the 4 minus the second number, which is negative 2, and then we have a double sign. So be careful there, because sometimes you will have double signs. Fix your double sign so you'd have 4 plus 2, and that would turn into m6. So in your mind, you want to say this turns into m2, but it's not. It's because you end up with a double sign, and you have to be really careful. So a good rule here is write out your work. Okay, do it. Okay. The only other thing you have to be aware of is sometimes there are coefficients or numbers in front of the letters. So something like 2m to the 2 times 3m to the 3. These are just numbers. They're not powers. They don't have exponents on them. Treat them as numbers. So multiply the 2 and the 3 together, and you're going to get the number 6. Done. The next part is deal with the letters separately so that you use the same rule. If I'm multiplying, I use rule 1. I add the exponents, so I'm going to get a 6 and m to the 5. So that's all you have to do if there's numbers in front of it. Final thing, if you're working with something like this, and there's 2 letters, deal with the letters separately. The m's can go together, and you'd have 2 plus 3, and the p's would go together, and you'd have 2 plus 1, and you end up with m5, p3. So all I did here was group the letters together and add their exponents. Okay, so that's multiplying and dividing exponents in a nutshell. Now I want you to practice these examples. Okay, so try those 4 examples before you move on.